Hello, Calgary, and hello, online Telespark community. My name is Jasmine. I'm the Director of Programs at Telespark, and like you, I am sitting at home looking for interesting ways to connect with wonderful and remarkable people. And as part of that, welcome to Spark Science from Home. So today, I'm in my house, and I'm so enthused and excited to introduce all of you this afternoon to Zac Trolley, a good friend of mine, a remarkable citizen scientist, a professional engineer, a speaker, and one of the only people I know who have come this close to a manned mission to Mars. So join me really quickly as we welcome in Zac, and as I click a couple of buttons. Here he comes. Hi, Zac.
Hello. How are you doing today?
I'm really good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a sunny day outside, so things are going well.
Perfect. Well, we're in our respective homes, sheltering in place, taking good care of ourselves and our neighbors by staying put for a little while. But welcome to Telespark Science from Home.
Thank you. I'm very excited to start to talk about Mars today. It's one of my favorite topics.
Well, terrific. It's one of mine as well. So as you know, for the last couple of weeks since shuttering the doors at Telespark and everyone staying from home, we've invited in the overall online community to basically take their stab at asking us their wildest and most interesting scientific questions. We've done the last 2 weeks on the floor at Body World's Animal Inside Out. And this week, you and I are going to talk about a whole different planetary experience. As everyone right now is in their homes building a wonderful variety of interesting forts and contraptions, we're really looking inward at what it means to be a community and what it means to be human and connect with one another. But I can't help every night when I crawl inside the fort that me and my family have built out of massive cardboard boxes is to be thinking about designing communities. And then you look up at night and we think about humans and the exploration of the universe and the fact that manned missions to Mars are a thing of the very near future. And so here at Telespark, we thought we should talk to one guy who actually knows a lot about this, and that's you. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
So Zac, one of the reasons that, of course, that we look to speak with you as we contemplate what life might actually look like for humans on Mars is because you are probably one of the most passionate Mars enthusiasts that we know. Plus, you've done a little bit of rolling up your sleeves and actual in-person training for this. So why don't you just take a quick moment and tell us in the community a little bit about yourselves? And while Zac is talking, I encourage everyone at home right now to start thinking about your most pressing Martian questions, and we'll sort of dive into those shortly. So Zac, on to you. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm an engineer here in Calgary, but my passion is in space and on Mars. At a very young age, in the 90s, when the Sojourner mission, the Pathfinder mission, landed on Mars, it was the first rover that landed on Mars, and you could actually log into the internet when the internet was brand new, and you could see new images of the rover leaving tracks on Mars, and it was one of the first times you could ever do that. And I started thinking, well, if you can drive rovers on Mars, then people could walk on Mars and live on Mars and do all those things. So, when I was 14, 15 years old, I started looking at what's it going to take to put people on Mars. And it's, very interesting right now when everyone is, like you said, living at home and kind of, thinking about these essential services, how that translates into space. Because we need to start basically from scratch. There's nothing there. There are no roads, no grocery stores, there's no electricity. So we need to start right from the ground floor and build everything new. So it brings up a lot of interesting questions about how do we do that? And especially on Mars, because Mars is far away enough that we can't do supply missions from Earth. So Mars has to a base on Mars has to be able to be self-sustaining. So once we figure out how to live on Mars, we can live anywhere in the solar system that we want. And that's what's truly exciting to me. When we figure out Mars, we can figure out how to build a base anywhere in the solar system to be self-sustaining. And that is really, really exciting to me.
Yeah, I agree. Essentially, if we think about it, If anyone is about to pack up and climb a mountain, let's imagine Everest, you have your base camp for the rest of that adventure as you seek your way to the top. And Mars, for humanity, for those of us looking to travel the solar system and beyond from Earth, Mars will actually be humanity's base camp.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
So that's why it's key, hey? Well, we have a very important question from Jasper, who's 5 years old, and he wonders, Zach, is there life for Martians on Mars?
So here is the question that's very, very exciting to scientists. So anywhere on Earth that we look for life, we find it. So we can look on the top of mountains, we can look in the bottom of the oceans, we can look in salt flats and deserts. We find life, and we find it in places we didn't think it would be able to survive. So we're just finding out on Earth places that that life survives. Now, Curiosity, the rover that's on Mars right now, part of its mission is looking at the chemistry in the ground. Yep, there's Curiosity there. So it's looking at that chemistry, and it's seeing how closely it is to Earth's chemistry. So what we're finding out is there's no reason why life wouldn't be on Mars. We just haven't found it yet. So we're probably not going to see Martians running around. There's no Martian cities, but there might be tiny little bacterias or little tiny animals. We just haven't been able to find them yet. Now, Mars is a very, very big place, and we've only spent, we've only looked in a few places. So I think the more we look, there's a very big chance we'll find some kind of life on Mars, and that would be very, very exciting.
Yeah, I also agree with that. It'll be very exciting. And so, Aurelia has the exact same question I have. Let's imagine that we're packing for Mars and we're about to leave tomorrow. How long would it take us to get there?
So when you leave Earth, you have to take in consideration where the planets are, because they're always constantly moving. So Mars, every 2 years, Mars and Earth line up to provide the shortest path possible. And even now, with the rockets that we have and the best transportation, the fastest we could get there is 6 months. So you have a window that opens up every 2 years, and it takes 6 months to get there. So you better make sure that you pack well, because you can't turn around and, if you forgot something, you better make sure you have everything packed that you need.
Yeah, and we can credit all of the engineers and scientists at the Canadian Space Agency, at NASA, and all of the international partners to be thinking through what it is we actually would need to pack on those manned missions. But let's imagine once we actually arrive, if you're the architect of a Mars colony, what do you need to contemplate initially once you arrive? Talk about the weather, the landscape. Like, what are you dealing with once you actually set foot on that planet?
So Mars is very dry and it's very cold. And a lot of it used to have water on the surface. So there's a lot of dry lake beds on Mars. And the terrain actually looks a lot like the Badlands in Drumheller. If you've ever gone out that way, that's kind of what it looks like. So right away when you land, you're going to need the basics. Somewhere to live, where it's warm and it has air, a way to make air so you can breathe, because you can't breathe the air on Mars. It doesn't have enough oxygen. And then water and food. And those are going to be your immediate requirements. So you can bring some of that with you, but a Mars mission is probably going to be a long-term mission. So you're going to want to have machines that can, do more of those resources. So instead of packing all your food with you, you want to bring a greenhouse with you so you can grow your own food. Instead of bringing all your drinking water with you, you're going to want to find ways of finding water on Mars and using that water in your base as well. So you have to think of your immediate needs and then your long-term needs at the same time. So it's a very complex problem, but hopefully we're going to be in the process of solving it very, very soon.
Yeah, agreed. So I just pulled up an image. I'm going to hide myself so folks.
Oh, Jasmine, now we can't hear you. Need to be there. There you are.
Am I here?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic.
We can't hear you anymore.
Can you hear me now or no?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, great. So this is a place where you actually inserted yourselves with other humans to actually research in real life what it would be like to live on Mars. And so you were talking about water, you were talking about food. Can you walk us through what is this environment? And if we're home and building our own, Martian habitats, what did you learn there that we should be applying to our own designs?
Absolutely. So the image we're looking at right now is the Mars Desert Research Station, and it's in Utah. And what it is it's an analog facility that's made basically to play make-believe on Mars. So what it is we go to this facility and we act as if we're on Mars. So we try and eat the same food. We do the same kind of precautions. You can't go outside without a spacesuit on. As you can see, it's remote. There's nobody around. And it's basically there to practice living on Mars before we actually go there. So if you look to the left, there's a two-story building there. And that's actually modeled after how wide rocket ships are. So in this scenario, you would actually use your rocket ship would land on Mars, and you use your rocket ship as your first base, and you build out. So that's the idea behind the NDRS. So at this facility, we have our water tanks that are there that we have to monitor every day. We have a greenhouse that grows food, so we can get fresh lettuce and vegetables there. The building on the far right is the science dome that we do science experiments in, a lot of geology experiments and those kind of things. And the other building kind of tucked away in the back is the observatory. So that's actually a robotic telescope that we use to do astronomy while we're in this base. And in the forefront, you can see there's 4 quads and some ATVs there that we use for missions. So we actually have scientific missions, geology missions that we would go on to while we are in simulation. So you put on suits, we go outside, we have our Capcom back in the base, and basically it's to work out all the kinks and all the issues we have before we actually go. And I spent 2 weeks there in an isolation mission 2 years ago.
So I'm really curious. We have heard from some of the most remarkable astronauts who have actually been to space and back, such as Commander Chris Hadfield and others, who have talked about tips and tricks that they've learned in having to mentally and emotionally prepare for time in isolation. What were some of the things that you learned through that experience too, that you've been able to apply now and that you would like to share with the community as we're home?
Sure. One of the things that happens when you live and work in the exact same place is sometimes those two things blend together. So one of the biggest things we did is we actually scheduled downtime, and we scheduled fun. So you'd be writing a report or doing some more writing email, and the mission commander would come by and say, nope, no more work. We're watching a movie, or we're playing a board game, or we're doing something, or we're going to play, or we're going to do yoga. And that was really important to do because you can get burnt out pretty easily if you don't schedule fun. So on a lot of these missions, the technology is there. We know how to make solar power. We know how to grow food. But if you're on a 2-year mission where you only have 6 other people to talk to, how do you keep cracking jokes? The same jokes on day 1 might get pretty boring on day 307. How do you get new jokes? So that mental part of the mission, even in 2 weeks, was really, really important. And I'm sure everybody at home can understand that now, how important that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so as we contemplate what it takes to not only thrive in our own homes and take some of those as truisms as we explore other places within our galaxy, that's one thing. And so the actual brass tacks of living on another planet such as Mars, you mentioned the importance of being able to make your water and your food while there, because it's not exactly easy to be packing that all up and taking it with you. So there's a sustainability of that. You've talked about the importance of connecting socially and finding time for fun so that we can be humans and thrive that way. Talk to me a little bit about electricity. There's a lot of technology to run if you're running a habitat on Mars. We talked a little bit about solar. Is that the way to go? If I'm building my own kind of replica and being an architect of my own Martian colony, should solar be my first choice, or should I be looking at other options?
So of the energy we use here on Earth, the one we use the most is fossil fuels, and that's not an option on Mars at all. One, because there's never been fossils, there's never been dinosaurs on Mars, so there's no oil.
That we know.
We're pretty sure there's no oil there. But there's no oxygen either in the atmosphere, so we can't actually, do combustion on Mars. So really, we have only two options. Solar power is one. Now, the issue with solar, there's two main issues with solar power. One is that Mars is further away from the sun than the Earth is, so it actually receives less sunlight. So the same number of solar panels you have on Earth gives you less electricity than it does on Earth, so you need more of them on Mars. And the other is that Mars has a lot of dust storms. So you'd have to be cleaning them a lot when you're on Mars. That would be one of your chores you'd have to do, is go out and clean the solar panels. The other possibility is using nuclear energy. So we would bring a small nuclear reactor with us that would provide the electricity and the heat for us on that facility. The problem with that is that, of course, a power plant is big and heavy, and it has to fit inside a rocket when you launch it, or figure out how to launch it in different parts and put it all together. So there's a lot of different ideas on that. People are, there's pros and cons to everyone, and we're going to see when the first mission lifts off what that choice is. Yeah. The International Space Station runs on solar power, but it's able to point its solar panels at the sun 100% of the time. So that's an easy decision for the space station. It's a different situation on Mars.
Absolutely. So let's imagine that we've made it there. We've set up the ability to have our living quarters. We're working on food. We're working on water, and we got to get out there, outside the hab, suit up, and step onto the Martian surface. What are we dealing with temperature-wise?
So Mars is cold. If you go on the equator on the nicest summer day at high noon, you're going to get maybe 15 degrees. But at nighttime, because Mars is a very thin atmosphere, it's going to go from plus 15 to about minus 150. So you're going to need a pretty good winter jacket to survive on Mars through that night. So, the spacesuits that you're wearing or the vehicles you choose to travel in are going to have to be very well insulated and heated. And they're going to be their own kind of mini, have their miniature power plants and all those things in them as well. So it's a very difficult environment to survive in. However, Mars is one of the most interesting planets in our solar system. It has the largest volcano in our solar system. It's the Olympus Mons is the same size as France. So one volcano is the same size as France. The Valles Marineris, the Grand Canyon of Mars, would stretch all the way across the United States. It's a 7-kilometer cliff all the way down. The entire northern continent of Mars used to be an ocean. So the whole ocean bed there that's ours to explore. There's caves, there's lava tubes, there's everything there to go exploring. So, having the suits and the vehicles to drive around is absolutely important, because that's what we want to do. We want to explore and we want to learn new things when we land there.
such a natural human trait, hey?
Absolutely.
The desire to go and explore the unknown. Now, Aurelia has a really great question, to talk about actually getting out, suiting up, hopping in different rovers and moving around. How big is Mars in comparison to Earth?
So Mars is about a third of the volume if you put them side by side. However, a lot of Earth is covered by water. We should actually call it, water, not Earth, because we have more water than we have ground, but we live on the ground, so that's what we call it. But because there's no water on the surface of Mars, the amount of ground on both planets is about the same. So if you take up, all the land we have on Earth, all that surface area, it's about the exact same on Mars. So there's a whole lot of area to explore on Mars.
I'm excited for us to set foot there. I know we have another rover headed there in the next little while. Perseverance, I believe. Do you know what the launch date is for that?
I can't remember. The coronavirus might impact that, depending on it's impacting everything. But that rover is really interesting. It's a sister rover to Curiosity, and it has some more advanced instrumentation on it to actually start looking for more signs for life and do more of that geology. So we're going to get a lot of really interesting data coming back. Mm-hmm. And it's also looking for, to help survey land for landing people on Mars. And that's part of it. That's part of its mission. So step by step, we're building, enough data to make sure we're choosing the right place to land, that it has enough resources for us to use when we get there, and it has some interesting things to look at. If we land in the middle of the desert and there's nothing there, well, we want to have some caves, we want to have some mountains, we want to be able to go to these different places and explore when we first touch down.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, Nellie wonders, is it inevitable for the colonization of new planets? Is this really where humanity is going? And I might even add that with a little should. What are your thoughts? You've been spending a lot of time, philosophizing and thinking about the reality of this. What do you think?
So unfortunately, I'm a huge space fan. So unfortunately, it's not inevitable that we go to Mars. We could stay on Earth forever and ever and ever and never go explore the whole solar system or the universe. Now that makes me sad. I'm a huge space fan. So I absolutely think that we should go explore our solar system. It's kind of like living on a block of 8 houses, and we live in one house, the third from the corner, right? We're in house Earth, and we've never gone to the other houses to explore and see what our neighbors are. And that's kind of where we're at now. So we don't have to go exploring our neighborhood, but I think we should. And I think we can learn a lot of stuff about learning to live on Mars. We figure out how to grow vegetables on the surface of Mars. We can grow vegetables anywhere. So if we're in the Arctic, in our remote communities here in Canada, we can use Mars technology to grow food in these communities here in Canada. So I think going to Mars would be amazing. But that technology can also be used in Canada to really help us out, through our long winters and stuff like that, to help better survive here.
So speaking of Canada, is there anything uniquely Canadian that maybe sets us up as a nation to do well on a planet like Mars?
Yeah, so I've talked to a lot of people that have done other analog missions, and as people are finding out now all over the world, being in isolation isn't easy. But Canadians are actually really good at it because we have long winters. So, we're used to at least a weekend or two out of the year, you get a snowstorm and you have to stay inside, and that's just how it is. You get stuck and you got to ask someone to go get you groceries, and that happens here. In other places, it doesn't. So they're learning this for the first time. So, we're used to going outside, to bundling up when it's cold and getting your toque and your mittens and, telling where you're going to be. If you're going out into the mountains for a camping trip, you let someone know where you're going to be, because it is dangerous. So, the way that we live our lives, I think we're actually kind of halfway there in the preparation for Mars exploration. So I think absolutely the Mars mission should have some Canadians on it because we're just really good at it.
There you go. I like it. Resilient Canadians accustomed to bundling up to get outside and explore.
Yeah.
Hey, so I see a really interesting question from Maddie regarding the propulsion of how we actually get to Mars. And so, Maddie is asking if you think it's possible for nuclear or hydrogen explosions as propulsion. What have you heard around the actual propulsion and jet propulsion to move from one planet to the next or beyond in our solar system?
So right now, a lot of people saying we should just use the same chemical rockets that we use now and operate those to get to Mars. We should just use what we have, the technology we have currently available, and that takes about 6 to 9 months to get to Mars. There are some new technologies. There's some electronic propulsion technology that would bring it down to like 60 days. The nuclear rocket idea, I can't remember what it was called, but there was a project in the 70s to look at that. And basically they would load kind of nuclear bombs in the rocket and kind of, put them out and explode them behind the rocket. And the problem with that is that it's kind of like a roller coaster. Every time one goes off, you go flying forward, and then you kind of slow down and then you go flying forward. So it's a very, very rough ride. The propulsions might get you there quickly, but humans are very fragile. So a machine might be able to survive that rocket ride, but humans are squishy and their bones break. So we have to be careful of the human cargo.
We got to treat that human cargo with dignity, and also the smoother the ride, the better. Hey,
absolutely, yeah. If it gets too rough, people are going to get pretty grumpy on the ride, and then it's not going well at all.
Well, Quentin is a little bit curious. You were talking about happiness and human connection. So if we're to build and colonize Mars, making sure that we schedule in time for fun and mental well-being, but that also means talking to our family and friends who might be still here on Earth. Mm-hmm. What might that look like? Could you FaceTime your friends in real time from Mars to Earth?
So no, you can't do FaceTime between Mars and Earth. So when we did our analog mission, that's something that's part of the specifications. Mars is so far away that it actually takes light a long time to get there. So the communications delay, the light delay between Earth and Mars is anywhere between 4 and 20 minutes, depending on where the planets are in their orbits. So any message you send, whether it's an email or an Instagram picture or anything like that, can take up to 20 minutes one way. So you send an email, you hit send, Earth gets it in 20 minutes, they write their response, it sends back, you get it another 20 minutes. So, I mean, that's kind of an issue with talking to friends, but it's more of an issue if something goes wrong. If you have to ask a question about a piece of equipment, it could take like an hour to get an answer. So you can't pick up the phone and call mission control on a mission to Mars. And that's why it's even more important to plan out your habitat and the way you're going to live, because you are on your own, basically. Mm-hmm. Like I said, you're too far away to rely on Earth. You need to bring all the tools and all the knowledge. Make sure you download Wikipedia before you head out, so you have that available to you. But just like we get images from Curiosity, we can send data back and forth, but it cannot be in real time. Mars is just too far away.
There we go. You just got to take a breath and realize it's like the days when we'd have to wait for that envelope to hit the mailbox.
That's right. It's like pre-internet mail days. That's what it would be like.
There you go. Excellent. Alana's wondering if you can reiterate the distance. How far away is Mars from Earth, and how long it takes to get there for her?
I would have to look up the exact distances, but it's always changing because the planets rotate around. Mars's orbit is actually because it's further out. It's longer. So that's why it takes 2 years for our planets to line up, because an Earth year is 365 days and a Mars year is 680 days. So the further you go out from the sun, the longer it takes to go all the way around. So
Yeah.
There are very, very vast distances between the planets, which is why being a rocket scientist is so difficult. You're always working with big, big numbers.
Really big numbers,
Yeah.
a lot of different data points, and then
Very
at the
small
same
margin
time
for
having to
error.
be incredibly precise.
Yes.
Well, so I think, oh, Pam has a really interesting question. I want to hit on Debbie's afterwards. Pam's wondering if you know how Mars got its name.
I do know how Mars got its name. So Mars, if you live in the city, it's actually very hard to see the night sky normally. But if you head out into the country, you can see Mars with just by looking in the sky if you know where to look. And because Mars is red, it's called the red planet. It's because it's covered in rust, actually. Mars, on the surface of Mars, there's a lot of iron in the soil, and over time it's rusted. So Mars is this red color, and it would come into the sky during harvest in ancient times. So Mars is the god of war, but also the god of harvest in Roman mythology. And because it was red, that's the color of, blood and all those things like that. And they put that, they associated that god with the planet Mars, and that's how it got its name.
Excellent. A question so I'm gonna go with Colleen's question and then Colette. So Deirdre is curious if you can use phones on Mars. And I think what she's curious about is, let's imagine you're actually building your habitat, and then maybe you've got one colony here and one colony over there, or you're also maybe trying to communicate with someone that's actually in a rover driving around. Mm-hmm. Can you use a phone, or what are the modes of communication that are being contemplated?
So you could use a phone, but you'd have to build your own cell phone towers because there's no cell phone towers there. But if you're on Mars, you can do Mars-to-Mars phone calls and do Mars-to-Mars video chats. We actually did that when we were in our simulation. There was another simulation happening in Europe, and we did a Mars-to-Mars phone call with that simulation because they would be inside communication range for us. So if you're on Mars, you have to set up your own infrastructure, but you could do real-time phoning and talking, but then anything off to Earth would have that lag into it. Yeah. So there'd be an Earth internet and a Mars internet, and then they would talk to each other. But yeah, you could do FaceTime and play video games with people on Mars.
With those that are literally closest to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the interesting questions that Colette just posed is, when we talk about colonizing Mars, at first, in most of our minds, we're thinking about the very few first humans to get there. We're not necessarily starting to think about multiple generations. And so she asks, have you had any conversations or contemplated the psychology or what it would actually take to raise kids? What does it look like to be a family on Mars?
So this is a very, very big question that space people are asking right now, 100%. We have had, I think, just shy of 600 people go into space. And of course, on the International Space Station, there's people up in space all the time, but they're not, they're not settlers, they're not families up there. Now, when we move to the moon and move to Mars, there'll be longer missions. So you might want to take families with you and do, build a life there. We don't have answers to how that's really going to work out. How many people do you need to bring to make a settlement? 5 is probably too little. Is 100 people too much? You have to think of everyone's job. You're going to need someone to grow food. You might need a school teacher. How many doctors do you need? How many police officers are you going to need on Mars at one point in time?
And at some point, you're going to have to write Martian Law, right?
At some point, there's going to be a Martian law. So
totally. Right now, space law is much like maritime law, right? You get there first, you call the shots.
That's right. So, all the technology, I think, is very interesting. But the real questions are, the first person that's born on Mars, how do they get a passport? If they want to come back to Earth, What do you get stamped on your passport when you come through the airport in Earth? So the astronauts that travel to space, they actually carry their passports with them, and they do have to go back through immigration when they come back through space. So how do we do that when people start going to Mars? It's going to be a very, very interesting question that we really can't answer until we start trying.
Fantastic. Well, there's so much to explore and discover. Really excited for the Perseverance rover to make its next journey and as a sister to Curiosity. To touch on a couple really quick questions, I see that Lila asked why Mars is red. We touched on that because the surface is essentially rust, which is really interesting and exciting. There's going to be probably a lot of terraforming that happens once we actually get there to dig under and explore more. And then one question I think as we wrap up is, Debbie had asked a little bit around even just, does it make sense for us as the human race to be investing in the exploration of Mars while there's so much to work on collectively in building thriving communities here on Earth? So was this something that you and your team talked about when you were also inside the research station, talking about imagining that you're on Mars, and also think about what does it mean to actually be an Earthling?
Right. So I get that question a lot, that why should we spend money in space exploration? There's a lot of things, happening on Earth right now. And I think space exploration actually helps us to figure out how to do things on Earth better. So NASA actually has the most international agreements of any organization in the United States government, because you have to work with all the countries. So, the International Space Station is a great example of all these countries working together and working on a problem together in a peaceful manner. So, you can see a picture of our team here. We're from all over the world. People, came to this the research center to do our work, and that's basically how space operates. So it allows you to keep lines of communication open through countries. There's a story of a cosmonaut who went up into space as a citizen of the USSR. That country fell apart, and he came back down again as a citizen of Russia. So all these international events happen, but space cooperation has been maintained through all of these world events. And as we learn about space and how to operate there, we actually get better at taking care of the Earth. So, there are people talking about doing space mining and getting space resources and stuff like that. If we mine things on an asteroid, we're not doing environmental damage here on Earth because it's on an asteroid. So, if we learn how to grow food on Mars, we can learn how to grow food here on Earth, and we help solve world hunger. So there's all these issues that we can work on. We can work on the problems on Earth and in space at the same time, and we can do both of them. And I think that's the way that we, help humanity move to become a better humanity, is do the things that are really hard. Living on Mars is really, really hard. But if we can figure out how to do that, then living on Earth becomes that much easier.
I really thank you for your time, Zac. This has been awesome. And it's been interesting to hear about your own experience at the Mars Desert Research Station and some of the things that we need to contemplate as we potentially pack our bags and head to Mars. And so while all of us look up in wonder right now and remain curious and think about how to build not only interesting and thriving communities outside of our own planet, we need to be thinking about how to build remarkable, creative, and thriving communities and human bonds here at home. And so as we do that, I encourage everyone, and so does TeleSpark, get out there in your own basements, living rooms, porches, balconies, and kitchens, and think about the role that you play in building your community and creating really phenomenal connections with your neighbors and friends. And think about the role that science and ingenuity and curiosity can play. And while you're doing that, this week, gather your materials, whether it's Lego blocks, whether it's plaster, whether it's giant cardboard boxes and tinfoil, and build your own Mars habitat. Take what Zac has taught you today. Think about power generation. Think about food and water. think about that really important aspect of connecting and having fun and making sure that there's time to do that. And think about how you explore outside of that. If you're sitting in your Mars research station in your own living room, how are you going from there to the bedroom to the bathroom? How are you moving around? And contemplate that, because curiosity loves constraints. So while we're home right now, that is a huge constraint, but it doesn't negate the fact that we can connect, we can design, we can build, and we can build really phenomenal and fantastic things. And so, Zac, thanks for joining us for Spark Science from Home. We really appreciate it. And if there's any other questions, connect with us on social media, and we'd happily funnel them over to Zac to answer for you. And any submissions that come in over this week, take photos, send them to Spark via social media. We'll survey up and fill up the coffers and select a few to share back out with the world. And hopefully when the doors reopen, we can build together in person.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks again, Zac. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
You betcha. Bye-bye.